tiny wheels, big personality. When you think of cars, you probably imagine muscle, speed, or size. Not these. These 7 cars are so small, they could practically fit in your closet. Built for squeezing through narrow streets, dodging traffic, or just making people ask, is that even legal? These micro machines were weird, wild, and totally unforgettable. Some were built to save gas, some were built to save space, and a few, they were just built because someone could. Let's dive into the smallest, strangest little rides that somehow made it onto the road and into the history books.
Make sure to subscribe and smash the like button.
Number 7. All right, class, let's take a quick drive back to 1936. Mussolini was still yelling, jazz was hot, and Fiat rolled out something so small, so cute, and so full of underdog charm that they literally named it after a cartoon mouse, Topolino, aka Little Mouse. Now don't let the name fool you. The Fiat 500 Topolino was no Mickey Mouse operation. This was a sincerely clever piece of engineering. Just 10 feet long, weighing around 1,300 pounds, and powered by a microscopic 569cc engine, the Topolino wasn't built to win races. It was built to get Italy moving. It was one of the very first people's cars, affordable, practical, and durable enough to handle the cobblestone chaos of pre-war and post-war Europe. Think of it as the Italian VW Beetle, just cuter and with better espresso in the glove box. Okay, not really. Here's what made it special. Front engine, rear-wheel drive layout, back when some cars still ran on hope and coal. It could hit 50 miles per hour downhill with a tailwind, which was just fine in an era where speed wasn't as important as, say, not walking. It helped teach an entire generation how to drive, and later influenced everything from the original Mini to modern-day city cars. And perhaps most importantly, the Topolino didn't just transport Italians. It helped rebuild Italy after the war. It gave people mobility, independence, and a little joy at a time when those things were in short supply. So yes, the Fiat Topolino may have been tiny, but it made a huge impact. It was the humble hero of a new automotive era, proving that sometimes the smallest cars leave the biggest legacy. Number 6. Launched in 1958, this little bubble on wheels was nicknamed the Ladybug in Japan. Not because it was slow, but because of its adorable round shape and bug-like charm. It was just 117 inches long, weighed under 1,000 pounds, and had a 2-stroke, 2-cylinder engine that buzzed like a lawnmower in a karaoke bar. That's right, you didn't so much drive the 360 as encourage it forward. But here's the thing, in post-war Japan, this car was revolutionary. It was affordable, it could squeeze through Tokyo's narrow alleys, and it didn't demand gallons of expensive fuel. It was Japan's answer to the VW Beetle, if the Beetle had a baby. Now, someone had the bright idea to sell this micro marvel in the United States. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. Americans took one look and said, "That's cute, where's the real car?" Between the interstate highways, pickup trucks, and the land of V8 engines, the Subaru 360 looked like a toy, or worse, a golf cart that got lost on the way to Pebble Beach. Safety concerns didn't help either. Consumer Reports called it not acceptable, which is basically the car review equivalent of a mic drop. Still, let's not be too hard on it. The 360 was never meant for muscle car country. In Japan, it did exactly what it was designed to do: move the masses cheaply and reliably. It laid the foundation for Subaru's future success and helped shift the mindset from bigger is better to small can be smart. So the Subaru 360 may have flopped in the US, but in Japan, it was a four-wheeled folk hero. And if you ever see one today, give it a little nod. That's a piece of automotive history wearing a ladybug costume. Number 5. The Bond Minicar, Britain's three-wheeled budget rocket, sort of. Built between 1949 and 1966, this was the United Kingdom's response to post-war austerity and gas rationing. The Bond Minicar had 3 wheels, 2 seats, and 0 frills. It was made of aluminum, powered by a motorcycle engine, and looked like what might happen if a scooter got too ambitious. And here's the kicker: it wasn't even legally a car. That's right, thanks to British tax loopholes, the minicar was considered a motorcycle with a roof. That meant cheaper insurance, lower taxes, and, perhaps best of all, no need for a full driver's license. If you could ride a bike, you could drive this thing. What could possibly go wrong? Now, about that reverse gear. It didn't have one. So if you parked poorly, missed your driveway, or just wanted to back out gracefully, too bad. The original models expected you to get out and push. That's right, parallel parking in a Bond minicar was more of a team sport. Later models solved this by allowing the entire engine to swivel with the front wheel, meaning you could technically spin the whole car in a tight circle. Handy? Yes. Dignified? Not even slightly. Still, for all its quirks, the Bond minicar was brilliantly British, clever, cheap, and built with wartime resourcefulness. It offered thousands of people personal transport at a time when even a bicycle was a luxury for some. Number 4. The Crossley CC Sedan, America's answer to the question nobody really asked in 1946, what if we built a car the size of a fridge? Built between 1946 and 1950, the Crossley CC was a microcar made in the good old US of A, back when everything else on the road looked like rolling battleships. This thing barely tipped the scales at 1,300 pounds, yet somehow crammed in a 4-cylinder engine, not much bigger than a sewing machine motor, but hey, it got the job done. Top speed, about 50 miles per hour, downhill with a tailwind and maybe a prayer. But here's the beauty. This wasn't about speed. The Crossley was about simplicity, efficiency, and quirk. You could fit it in a phone booth and park it where bicycles feared to tread. Here's a fun fact. The U.S. Postal Service used Crossleys as mail delivery cars in some areas. Imagine the neighborhood kid pointing and yelling, "Hey, the clown car brought the mail again!" But postal workers loved them for being easy to maneuver and ridiculously cheap to run. Inside, Spartan. Outside, adorably boxy. But under the hood, Crossley innovated, introducing one of the first production overhead cam engines in the US. Fancy tech in a not-so-fancy shell. Unfortunately, Americans in the booming post-war era didn't want tiny cars. They wanted chrome, fins, and horsepower, not thrift and utility. So, the Crossley CC faded out quietly, like a polite guest who knew when to leave the party. Number 3. The BMW Isetta 300, or as it's affectionately known, the bubble car. If a golf cart and a space helmet had a baby, this would be it. Built from 1955 to 1962, the Isetta was BMW's post-World War lifeline. The company was on the ropes. Their factories had been bombed, their luxury cars weren't selling, and they needed something, anything, to keep the lights on. Enter this tiny, egg-shaped oddball with a heart of gold, or rather, a one-cylinder 12-horsepower engine. That's right, 12 horsepower. We're talking lawnmower levels of power, but it was enough to get the Isetta up to about 50 miles an hour, assuming you weren't in a hurry or going uphill. Still, it sipped fuel, cost next to nothing, and could squeeze into parking spots you'd normally reserve for bicycles. But let's talk about the weirdest feature. The entire front of the car was the door. No, really. You walked straight into the car like stepping into a fridge. And since the steering wheel was attached to the door, it swung out with it, basically giving you a hug as you climbed in. Inside, cozy. 2 passengers max, and if you brought a bag of groceries, one of you had to hold it on your lap. Despite the wackiness, the Isetta was a massive hit in Europe, especially in a recovering economy where people wanted personal transportation that didn't bankrupt them. It became a symbol of mobility, practicality, and post-war ingenuity. And for BMW, this little bubble on wheels literally saved the company. It bought them time, kept money coming in, and helped bridge the gap to the sleeker, faster cars that would come later. Number 2. Messerschmitt, a company best known for building terrifyingly fast fighter planes, suddenly found itself in a bit of a pickle. They were banned from making aircraft. So, naturally, they pivoted to tiny 3-wheeled bubble cars. Enter the Messerschmitt KR200, 1955 to 1964, a microcar that looked like a fighter jet fell in love with a gumdrop. KR stood for Kabinenroller, or cabin scooter, because this was basically a scooter with a roof, a windshield, and a dream. The design was wild, a clear canopy bubble, tandem seating, just like a jet trainer cockpit, and handlebars instead of a steering wheel. You sat in front, your brave passenger sat behind you, and together you looked like you were about to taxi for takeoff at about 30 miles per hour. Under that sleek, aircraft-inspired body, a 191cc 2-stroke engine, putting out just 9.9 horsepower. That's right, less power than a modern leaf blower. But it was light, nimble, and surprisingly efficient. And hey, it was still cooler than most lawnmowers. The KR200 could technically hit around 56 miles per hour, assuming the wind was behind you, the road was downhill, and your passenger was fasting. But none of that mattered. This wasn't about speed. It was about style, survivability, and putting post-war Germany back on wheels. It even had a reverse gear, sort of. You'd restart the engine running backwards. The 2-stroke allowed that, and suddenly the car could go in reverse. Wild, right? Over 30,000 were made, and they remain icons of quirky engineering, Cold War ingenuity, and the simple joy of turning fighter plane DNA into a glorified street pod. The KR200 gave people jet vibes with scooter horsepower. And honestly, that's a win. Number 1. Peel P50. Produced from 1962 to 1965 on the Isle of Man, a place better known for motorcycle racing than car design, the P50 holds the Guinness World Record for being the smallest production car ever built. How big are we talking? Just 136 centimeters long and 91 centimeters wide. That's shorter than most fridges and narrower than a sofa. With 3 wheels, 1 headlight, 1 windscreen wiper, and 1 door on the left-hand side, it was clearly designed for one thing: to exist. Under the bonnet, and that's putting it mildly, was a 49cc engine capable of propelling you to a blistering top speed of 60 kilometers per hour. Not fast enough to escape regret, but good enough for a trip to the corner shop, unless you hit a hill, a gust of wind, or a cheeky squirrel. The P50 didn't even have a reverse gear. How did you reverse? Easy. You got out and grabbed it by the handle. Yes, it had a handle, like a suitcase. This is not a joke. This is engineering art. And yet, this absurd little car was legal to drive on the road. In fact, one of the P-50's most famous stunts involved a man driving through the corridors of the BBC building, weaving between desks, through lifts, and into the studio, because it was small enough to fit between the cubicles. Only about 50 were originally made, and today, if you find one, it will cost you more than a luxury SUV. Why? Because it's more than just a car. It's history on wheels, full of absurdities. So, if you ever feel like your car is too cramped, just remember, some people once paid good money to drive the glorified motorized lunchbox and had a blast doing it. Thanks for watching the video. Well, subscribe and like.